Welcome back to Books and Ideas. I'm your host, Dr. Ginger Campbell, and this is episode 61. It's been over a year since I released an episode of Books and Ideas, so I wanted to celebrate by having a very special guest, Podcasting Hall of Famer Mur Lafferty. We're going to talk a little bit about her new book, 6 Weeks, but we'll also talk about Mur's long-running podcast, I Should Be Writing, and I also asked her to share some of the highs and lows of her career so far. If you are an aspiring writer, this is an episode you won't want to miss. I always enjoy talking with Mur, and even though this interview is fairly short, I think it's one everyone will enjoy. I will be back after the interview with a few brief announcements, including a bit about my plans for the rest of 2017. It's really great to be talking to you again. It's hard to believe how long it's been.
I know, it's been forever.
I was looking back and I realized it was 2013. I didn't realize it had been that long.
Wow.
And it's even harder to believe that it's been 10 years since we first met, that time when I went up to Durham to go to the Podcast Academy.
Ah, yes.
It seems like forever ago. But I guess we've both been busy all that time. Anyway, I'm really happy to have you back on Books and Ideas.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And since you're one of the people who inspired me to get into podcasting, I wanted to congratulate you for being inducted into the Academy of Podcasting Hall of Fame.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that was a shock, but it was exciting.
Rob Walsh got in last year, so did you get to catch up with him at WorldCon since it's in Kansas City?
Yeah, we talk on occasion, but I saw him at WorldCon.
Yeah, I think he was really excited about that being in Kansas City. Are you going to go to Helsinki?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to that for a while.
So would you go to WorldCon if you were not a writer? Is that really a place that the writers go to smooze with each other, or is it more, or are there fans there too?
There are fans. It's a fan convention, but I don't know if I would go. It's hard to say. I've been a writer or wanted to be a writer my whole life, so it's hard to imagine what I would do if I wasn't.
So the last time we talked, you had just won the John W. Campbell Award for Best New Writer, which is given out at WorldCon, and you had published The Shambling Guide to New York City. I know that since then you've published The Shambling Guide to New Orleans, which I enjoyed, and your new book is out now called 6 Weeks.
Yes.
Of course, that's our excuse for talking, but before we get into that, for the sake of any listeners who don't know your work, I was wondering if you would start out by talking a little bit about your long-running podcast, I Should Be Writing.
Sure. My podcast, I started it in 2005. I was already a podcaster, but at the time, to my knowledge, I hate saying this is an absolute because there could have been somebody else out there, but to my knowledge, there was only one other writing podcast, and that was Michael A. Stackpole's The Secrets. And that talked to people from a very established writer's point of view. And while it was great, he didn't cover all the problems I was having, which is the crushing self-doubt you get when you get a rejection, or how you think you're the only one who has certain problems like the writer's block or procrastination or whatever. And so I wanted to do a podcast for a wannabe writer from the perspective of somebody who was starting their career. So that's when I Should Be Writing started in 2005.
Did you start before iTunes?
Yes. Actually, I started podcasting before iTunes. I think I Should Be Writing and iTunes came out around the same time. I can't remember.
I think that's how I found you, although I was more of a Geek Fu Action Grip fan.
Yeah, I think iTunes started supporting in June or July of that year, and I Should Be Writing in August. So yeah, my second podcast came out after iTunes.
So Geek Fu was first?
Yes.
And so you had to code your own RSS feed and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. I found a blog plugin that would help me with that, but there were lots of bugs.
Yeah, I didn't aspire to do podcasting until iTunes, but the minute it appeared, which I remember it very vividly as being July of 2005, because as soon as I listened to my first shows, which I think was you and The Signal and maybe This Week in Tech, I was like, I want to do that. I want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I never could do the style you do where you share your vulnerabilities, though. I really admire that.
Oh, thank you. That's actually what's made the show successful. I don't have wisdom to give from on high, but I can certainly say that all of the anxiety people are feeling, I've probably felt it too, and it's probably normal. So it's okay. That's pretty much my entire message from my show is it's okay.
So one thing I'm curious about, since over the years, I know you've interviewed a lot of successful fiction writers, mostly, I guess, in the sci-fi genre. How has your relationship with these writers changed over the years as you've, developed your own writing skills?
Well, surprisingly, I didn't realize I was networking as I was networking because I was getting to know people. And then when I had books coming out, they already knew me because I'd interviewed them. And so didn't realize I already had an established relationship with a lot of authors, which was really helpful.
So you did something you were really interested in, and it had this wonderful side effect.
Yes, exactly.
So anything else you'd like to talk about before we do talk about 6 Wakes?
Well, since starting I Should Be Writing, I decided to do another show that focused more on the business. I Should Be Writing is focused on beginning writers, and started a new show. I still call it new because in my timeline of podcasting, it feels new, but it's 2 years old. A show called Ditch Diggers, where my friend Matt Mollis and I talk about writing from the business point of view. And that's a very different kind of mindset. So I Should Be Writing is supportive and clean, and Ditch Diggers is matter of fact and explicit. So I have a lot of I Should Be Writing listeners going to Ditch Diggers, but sometimes they get depressed because they hear stuff that you struggle with later that maybe they're not ready to hear. But I can't stop them, and I wouldn't.
Yeah, so if you had it to do over again, if you look back on these last 10 years, would you have done anything different?
Gosh, I don't think so. The really cool thing about getting into podcasting at the beginning was you didn't know what worked and what didn't. So even if you did something that didn't work, you learned something and helped other people along to learn that they shouldn't do that either. So even if you're trailblazing and you're going in the wrong direction, you at least tell people, there's a pit over there you don't want to go. So even my mistakes and failures, I think, really helped create what I am today and what podcasting is.
Yeah, because I can remember thinking back on when I first started listening to you, there was a point where you hadn't quite really made the commitment to being a full-time writer. Do I remember that correctly?
Well, I was a full-time writer just in the way that I'd been laid off. So I was a freelancer that was trying to do anything I could. So that included writing and podcasting. That seems to be the same, but I don't know if you consider it that.
Well, I guess what I was thinking of was it seemed like there was a point, I got the impression, of course, we're not close, so this is a very sideways thing for me to say, but that there was a point at which you were still sort of looking for a real job, so to speak, and then there was a point at which you said, wait a minute, and I'm sure it wasn't a point, I'm sure it was a hard internal struggle, a point at which you realized, if I'm going to do this, I've got to give it my all.
Well, not exactly. I was a writer and podcaster for several years, and then my daughter went to elementary school, and I thought, if I wanted to get a day job, now would be the time to do it. And so I went out and got a day job, and then I worked for a year and then got laid off. So it was time again to be the full-time writer because didn't really have a choice.
So the good thing you're a writer. Think about those people who get laid off and aren't writers.
Yeah.
They can't lay you off from being a writer.
No.
So you want to talk a little bit about 6 Wakes, and because of the nature of it, I'm going to sort of let you tell what you want people to know about the book, since it's sort of a whodunit.
Sure. 6 Wakes is a clone murder mystery in a generational starship where there are 6 clones wake up in their cloning vat, and cloning is used to extend life, not multiply it. And they wake up around their own murdered bodies, and there are only 6 of them on the ship, so they know that one of them had to have done it, but they're all either dead or in a coma, so they don't know which one of them actually killed them. And there are lots of terrible things happening on the ship as well, so they have to fix the ship and try to figure out what happened in the years that are missing from their memories.
Yeah, it's a really interesting take on the old 6 people trapped in a room. Who's the murderer?
Yeah.
Are sci-fi mystery novels very common?
I don't know.
Did you find that you were one of those, they couldn't figure out what genre you were, whether it was sci-fi or mystery, or were you established enough that it didn't matter?
Well, it wasn't that I was established. It was that my publisher is Orbit and they're a sci-fi publisher. So it automatically was sci-fi. But I've actually been thinking about genre a lot. And it's interesting that sci-fi and fantasy imply a setting, whereas the other genres, such as mystery and romance, imply plot. So with romance, you know you're going to get a romance, love story, and a happily ever after. With mystery, you know you're going to get some kind of murder or otherwise whodunit strange thing going on, and it should be solved by the protagonist. But with science fiction and fantasy, that tells you in what world the story's happening. So you can put romance in sci-fi fantasy. You could put mystery in sci-fi fantasy. I didn't set out to write a mystery. It just kind of happened.
The cloning part was the seed idea?
Yeah, pretty much. It's hard to say because, this was an idea that kind of ruminated in my head for a little while before I sold it, and then I wrote it and different things came up. So it's hard to tell what started it, but I think the cloning idea started it. It's just hard to say. The lifespan of a novel is a lot messier than people actually think.
Yeah, and what I'm interested in, actually, to be honest, is since I've watched your work over the last 10 years, I'm interested in whether this book was different to you in the process of writing it. How did it compare to the stuff that you wrote before?
Well, yeah, it was really different. I'd never written a mystery before or anything close to a mystery. It was a challenge to figure out what to do and how to do it. I read a lot of Agatha Christie to prepare for it once I realized I was writing a mystery.
Yeah, one of the things that it seemed different to me compared to the other books of yours that I've read was a larger cast of characters.
Right.
In terms of giving each one of them a real backstory. And even though Maria seems to still be sort of the main character, it's not like in the Shambling Guide where you have, I forgot what the main character's name is.
Zoe.
You have a clear main protagonist.
Right. Well, I had to give a lot of different people the spotlight because you couldn't tell who was the focus because you had to figure out who did it. So Maria was the protagonist, but I had to give everybody their own voice to make sure that the reader was properly confused.
Or sympathetic or not sympathetic toward the characters, depending on the characters.
Yes.
And of course, cloning did bring up a lot of interesting ethical questions.
Yes.
Have you considered writing another book in that same world? I mean, now that you've created this really interesting world.
I have considered it. The book does not end on a cliffhanger, but it's a generational starship with a lot of people asleep and a lot of people in the database. So the potential for more stories is high. But I realized recently that because one thing people love about the story is the mystery, if I write another one, there's going to have to be that mystery element as well.
And you don't know if you really want to write another mystery.
Yeah, well, I had fun writing this one. It was just something different I'd never approached before. So it was a lot of studying the greats and trying to figure out where to go. I only had a 1-book contract, but I'm going to be proposing another 6-week story to my editor to see how that goes over.
What about the chances of 6 Weeks being made into a movie? I mean, it seems like a natural movie to me.
It does, but I have zero control over that. Hollywood is its own machine. I have Hollywood agents that work with my literary agent who are representing the book. So they're in charge of whoever wants to make it into a movie. They'll talk to them and then eventually I'll hear about it. So yeah, I'd love for it to become a movie.
So was one of the Shambling Guides going to be made into something?
Netflix bought the rights for both the Shambling Guide New York City and Ghost Train to New Orleans. They announced it last May, I think. I got the deal 3 years ago, but they only announced it last May, and I haven't heard anything since.
That must be frustrating.
A little bit frustrating, but, it was free money, so I can't complain too much. But it is frustrating. Almost every day I feel like I see a new Netflix series show up. And so they're aggressive with their production. I just don't know, concerning my books, where in the production they are. Yeah, that's a little frustrating, but I still have hope. They still have the rights.
I don't know anything about how this works. When they actually make it into a show, then you'll get more money?
Yes. Yes, they pay a little bit for the option, and then if they actually make it, you get more.
Well, I'm hopeful for you.
Thank you. Me too.
So, on the subject of movies and awards, I noticed that last year that John W. Campbell Award went to Andy Weir, the guy who wrote The Martian.
Yeah, I think so.
I read an interview of him where he said that his next book wasn't going to be so science-y, which I found a little discouraging because I thought one of the great things about The Martian was it was really science-y.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that really spoke to people was the science. So I don't know. I don't know what he's going to do. But he made the science so approachable for people like me who's not necessarily best at the science.
It made it clear like why science matters.
Yes.
Which matters to somebody like me whose whole podcasting thing is around getting people to understand why science matters.
Exactly.
Well, I just wanted to tell you that when I was reading this book, I kept thinking, wow, Mur's writing has come so far.
Thank you.
And if I didn't know that it was you that wrote it, not to say that I don't know what I'm...
No, I understand what you mean. My mom said the same thing.
I mean, I've always loved your writing, but I remember when it was kind of rough around the edges, and this book, to me, seemed totally polished. I missed your wry sense of humor, although Maria had it a little bit, and what's his name, Hero had it a little bit.
Yeah. Well, they made me take some stuff out because humor cuts the tension. I had more humor in there, but unfortunately it had to be taken out.
Well, I don't know. I don't think that humor hurt the tension of Buffy.
Well, yeah.
Well, I'm glad to know that you haven't lost your humorous touch. You just got edited. Well, these things happen.
Well, I don't mean to say anything bad about my editors. I think they really did a good job helping me shape the book into something that people liked. There were some parts that were heavily massaged to push the book in a slightly different direction that I think made it a better book. So if I'd self-published it, it would not have been nearly as good. But yeah, they did ask me to cut some of the humor for attention purposes.
So that's an interesting point because I was wondering, since you did start out using audio podcasting as a way of getting your work out early on, and then, now you've written to the mainstream publishers, I guess that's one of the main advantages of having a publisher, theoretically, is having this help with editing, although I've heard that's not always what happens.
Some publishers edit more than others. As I understand it, I've only worked with one. Some people believe that their writing is come down from on high and goes from God to their brain to their page. Good for them. But I know that the books that I've had professional editing help with have been a lot better because that's their job. It's their job to see what works and what doesn't and what will work for the market and what doesn't.
So how has writing changed you?
Oh, gosh. I don't know. I mean, I've been doing it my whole life, except for the part that I wasn't doing it and I wished I was. So it's part of me that's evolved with me. Implying that writing changed me makes me feel like it was me and then writing came upon me. But I don't quite feel that way. I feel like I've been doing this the whole time. So that is what me is. I talk good. I write better.
Do you have a proudest moment?
The night I won the Campbell was a dream come true. It wasn't one moment, but the response to Six Wakes has been a little surprising. Because one, I've never written anything like this before, and I had a lot of self-doubt. I was really scared. And then I had an incident a little while ago at a con where I read a piece from an earlier draft. The response was not good in that the audience was writers. The audience were made of dudes. And they thought that since it was a small reading, it was more of a round table where they could critique it. And that really hurt my confidence. And then my first review wasn't good. The first pro-publication review that came out was Kirkus, and it wasn't good. And so I was just absolutely sure that it was going to tank. And then everything after that was amazing. It was, Publishers Weekly and Library Journal liked it, and RT liked it, NPR Books liked it. People were excited to get it, and they were reading it in a day or two. So I think Six Wakes having come out and been so well received that's been a proud moment for me. been a little weird because I didn't expect it at all, but it's been really wonderful.
Yeah, because now you've put out enough books that you got past that sort of naive expectation point to the point where your expectations are tapped down. So
managed. Yeah.
So what about disappointment? A biggest disappointment?
Oh, that would be the Heaven series, the Afterlife series. This was a series of novellas I put out via podcast, and my audience loved them. Hands down, 100%. People loved this series so much. And I got an agent because, gosh, I can't remember the timeline anymore. But anyway, I had an agent, and she wanted me to first rewrite to make it better. First, take the 2 novellas, make it into a novel, try to sell it. She couldn't sell it. Then she's like, maybe YA. So let's bring the people down a little bit in age, rank up, ratchet up their naivete, take out the sex, see if we can sell that. Couldn't sell it. Okay, well, let's take it back to adults. And at that point I said, I don't want to anymore. And I took my earlier files and I decided to do self-publishing. So I did a Kickstarter, and everybody who loved the books jumped onto the Kickstarter. And so my goal was $2,000 to fund the creation of the ebook professionally, and I got 20. And so that was really gratifying. But because of the popularity of the Kickstarter, other agents came sniffing around and started asking me. And I'm like, I don't think you're going to be able to sell this. And they're like, no, it's great. We love it. And so I let another agent try to sell it, and she couldn't. And she dumped me. And then another agent came across and said she really liked my stuff. And I'm like, I'm done. I'm done editing this thing that used to give me so much pleasure. And now I've edited it so many times, I've begun to hate it. And she was trying to, gosh, I can't even remember. I've had too many agents, Ginger. That's the problem. And none of them have been a terrible experience, but I have had a lot. But this one, she quit being an agent. It's not like she quit me. She just quit the business entirely. So she passed me up to her boss, who was not a science fiction fantasy agent. She didn't like anything I was working on at the time, but she loved the Afterlife series and wanted to try to sell that. And I resisted. And I finally said, look, are you interested in anything that my writing has become in the 9 years since I wrote Heaven? And she's like, not really. So she and I parted amicably. And it's just been such a weird thing that my readers have loved so much and no publisher has been interested in. And because agents come along and try to assure me that people will be interested in it and get my hopes up, and then I edit it, and then I hate it just a little bit more after I edit it again, that has become my biggest disappointment, is that I created this thing that I loved, and frequent edits and failures have made me hate it. And at this point, I've said if I ever do the Dan Brown thing where I write something that hits big and editors want to publish my older novels, so if they ever want to grab the Afterlife series, I'm going to have to hire somebody to edit it for me because I can't touch it again. I hate it so much that I just can't. I don't know anywhere I could take the editing from here. And so that's why.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to ask you if there was anything you wish you had done differently, but I have a feeling I know the answer to that.
I don't know. I don't know if I would have done anything differently. It's if somebody comes along and says, I can sell your book, you don't say no to that.
Right. Do you have the original? Do you still have the original somewhere?
I don't think so.
That's sad.
I have the files I self-published, but that is different from the podcast. I did lose one of the files. I'm terrible at keeping track. My husband has promised me he's going to teach me versioning or give me some sort of software to help with versioning, but it's never really happened. And so I keep losing old stuff. But I remember when I was doing the Kickstarter to get the ebooks going, I realized I didn't have a file for book 3. And so I had people, I sort of crowdsourced the thing of help me transcribe this, or help me find a software to transcribe it and help me clean it up. And I had enough listeners that really, really helped out, and I was very grateful to them. So I suppose the audio files are the original. I don't have it written down.
I mean, I think I heard the original. I don't think I ever read a written version.
Mm-hmm.
Did Evo shut down Patio Books?
I think Patio Books evolved into something else. He's been sending me occasional emails talking about where the business is going, but because I make like $7 a quarter or something, I haven't paid too much attention. I know that sounds terrible, but I haven't had the rights to release a podcast novel in several years. So
right.
I haven't been too much onto patiobooks.com. That sounds terrible. I'm sorry.
I just know I was contributing to it, and I noticed that my contribution was canceled recently, and I haven't gone to the website to see whether or not he shut it down. I was just curious, since that's where the Heaven series originally lived.
Yes.
So what has been your biggest surprise?
Probably, like I said earlier, how I Should Be Writing was a secret networking tool that I didn't know I was using. That because I'd interviewed people like Connie Willis and John Scalzi and Neil Gaiman early in my podcast career, that would make, it's not like anything's paved the way for me, but I always tell people on my podcast that networking is like putting a drop in a bucket. At some point it's going to tip, but you don't know when, but you want to keep adding drops. And I know that making these relationships has been helpful. And possibly my favorite anecdote about it is I got to interview Lev Grossman the day of the Hugo ceremony in Reno, I think, 2011, I want to say. And he wasn't there with anybody. He didn't know anybody. And so we were chatting after the interview, and he said, will I see you at the parties tonight? And I said, well, the Hugo parties are invite only, so I'm not a nominee, so no. And he's like, well, I've got a +1. And I'm like, you're not bringing it? Okay, sure, yeah. So I got to go to the Hugo cocktail party with Lev Grossman, more as his date, which I spent like 10 minutes with him, and he called me the worst date ever. This is all very tongue-in-cheek. Both Lev and I are both happily married. Just the fact that he helped me get into the party. But at that party, I met the woman who would become my editor at Orbit.
Wow.
And
you just never know.
It's. I would like to think that my book would have been purchased on merit alone, but that kind of interaction does not hurt at all. And so if not for my podcast, I wouldn't have met Lev and had that time with him and gone to the party and met my editor. My book may have just still been kind of languishing in slush. Who knows? But the biggest surprise is just how well just doing interviews from the point of view of somebody who does not know what they're doing in writing has helped my writing career.
So, of course, I have to ask you for advice for aspiring writers.
Don't quit. I quit for several years. I got discouraged. I figured once I got through with college, I had learned all I could learn. And if I wasn't good enough to be published, I wasn't good enough. Nobody was there to tell me, no, you just keep writing and keep getting better. I didn't consider that. So I quit because I wasn't good enough for a long time. And now that I'm in my 40s, I'm thinking, wow, look at all that lost time. And I should have been writing. That's great. So I just tell people it doesn't matter how bad you feel about whatever rejection you got or whatever comment or whatever bad thing you feel about your own writing or your own procrastination. Don't quit. Because I know a lot of people who are very talented who quit because they were discouraged. And people who may not be as talented who don't quit will more likely get published. So who's the bigger success? The very talented person who doesn't write or the person who just is a hard worker and plows through? And, it's one of those things I wish someone had told me when I was 21.
But would you have listened?
I don't know.
So what do you do when you're not writing or parenting?
Oh, I play too many computer games. I'll be
You
honest.
still find out to do that?
Oh, yeah. Well, you said when I'm not writing or when I'm not parenting, that's, I like to garden. I like to run when it's warm, and I like to play computer games, tablet or we have almost all of them, I think. Because of my husband's job, we have all the consoles. So we have a lot of games in the house.
Do you have a favorite genre?
It used to be RPGs. Actually, it still is RPGs. Skyrim and Dragon Age. Different games, but both in the RPG area. But lately I've been playing a lot of Overwatch, which is the online shooter from Blizzard, which I resisted for a long time, but because I'm not good at shooters. But my daughter pointed out that there are a lot of support characters, a lot of people laying traps, a lot of people healing. And so once I got involved in, I could play a rollerblading DJ who can shoot sound waves and push people back and heal people at the same time, I was in.
Yeah, I don't play multiplayer because I like shooters, but I'm bad.
You should try Overwatch. There are a lot of options, a lot of different. There are people who, once they lock on, they can just shoot a stream of healing, a stream of damage, whatever, and you don't have to focus so much. Also, Blizzard, unless you can have voice chat on if you're a masochist, but you turn voice chat off, you don't have people yelling at you. You can say things like thanks and hi and need healing, and you don't get the abuse that is all too common in online gaming these days.
Yeah. I'm kind of looking forward to the new Mass Effect because that's the only RPG that I've ever really gotten into. In fact, I actually played the third game twice to see if I could get my character to survive at the end. And I played as a female shepherd, so that I think that was a big part of what made it work for me. I mean, I was amazed when I got done how invested I was in the character. I found it very interesting. Couldn't quite get into Dragon Age because I just am not a fantasy person. I'm a pure sci-fi person.
It's funny. I like sci-fi and fantasy, but I can't get into Mass Effect, and I feel so left out because all of my friends who like Dragon Age like Mass Effect more, and I feel like I'm missing something. I don't know what it is.
And I actually interviewed, I've done an interview with a woman who used to do a show about video game music. Unfortunately, she lost her funding. She was working for a public radio station in Minnesota, so she's not on anymore. But if you ever want to listen to the old episodes, it's called Top Score. And I also interviewed the woman who wrote the novels that go with the Gears of War game.
Oh, cool.
And she's also written some Halo novels. And she was a really interesting writer to interview. But how can my listeners find your work? Besides, obviously, on Amazon.
Yes, Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And my website is murverse.com. That's where you can find all of my writing and novels. That's the same thing. Sorry, writing and podcasts. And I am fairly active on Twitter at Mighty Mur. And Mur is exactly how it sounds. Don't make it too difficult on yourself. It's M-U-R. A lot of people try to put more vowels in there. It's just basic. Or more R's.
Yeah, we're kind of old school since we got on Twitter back in the day when people, didn't use their names. So yeah. I have Doc Artemis and you have Mighty Mur. And
yeah.
So since I have read Six Wakes and it's going to be a while, I can't wait till the audio version comes out. I'll listen to it again out. Then. But
it's
is
out.
It out now?
Yeah, it came out a week after the print version came out.
Okay, so I'll have to get that. Did you narrate it yourself?
Yes.
Fantastic. I just, since I grew up listening to you as a writer, I just like to listen. So given that I've done that, what should I read next while I'm waiting for your next book?
What are you in the mood for? Serious, whimsical, fun, makes you think? Because I've got a lot of good books that I read last year and this year that I'm happy to tell you in what just tell me the direction you want to go.
What about Connie Willis's new book?
Connie Willis's new book is one of those things where I devoured it in a couple of days and I loved it. And then I read some criticism of it and I thought, yeah, I guess you're right. But I still devoured it in 2 days and loved it. Basically, if you're a fan of Connie Willis, then you'll probably see a lot of the things coming because it's a Connie Willis sci-fi romance, but it's still just a lot of fun. If you're looking for fun escapism, I'd say Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. That one it's like Star Trek. It's like you've got an ensemble on a ship. They have adventures. It's not each chapter is an adventure, but each person kind of gets their own encompassed adventure as they're heading towards a final destination. So there sort of is one big plot, but it feels very episodic. It's fun. All the characters are awesome, and they connect and don't connect in very pleasing ways. And I'm reading the sequel right now. It's just so much fun to listen to something that doesn't stress you out in today's day and age. So Becky Chambers stuff is fun.
Have you ever read the Honor Harrington series?
No, I have. Somebody gave me the first book in that, and I never really got into it, but I've heard it's amazing.
Yeah, he's kind of gone off, he's sort of wore out the story, and the last book he published actually doesn't even have Honor Harrington in it, which pissed off the fans.
I bet.
But I would recommend skipping the first one and reading the second one, which I think it's called something like In the Queen's Honor or something like that. Anyway, the second one's the best. So,
okay.
Well, I have really enjoyed getting to talk to you again, Mur, and I hope we meet each other again face to face someday.
Yeah, it's always fun talking, Ginger. Thank you for having me on.
And I warned you I haven't put out an episode of this show in a year, but you'll still reach hopefully a few new readers, I hope.
No, that's great. Thank you.
I'm glad to hear that Six Wakes is doing so well. I mean, I never read the reviews, of people's stuff before I interview them. I always want to just come in from my own point of view, and I ignore all the stuff the publisher sends out, and I ignore the reviews, so that when I'm interviewing somebody, that's not influencing what I ask. So right. I'm glad to hear that it's doing so well, because you've worked really hard and you deserve the success that you're having now.
Thank you so much. That's really great to hear. I appreciate that.
And thanks again for getting me into podcasting, I think. It's an addiction. Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
We're here for you.
I actually would like to start some new shows, but I can't find the time.
Yeah.
I think a co-host might be a good idea.
Yeah.
But I
find that.
But the letting go of control might be hard.
Well, you can have control, just have the co-host call in.
Good point. Well, I'm going to let you go and keep on writing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ginger.
You're welcome. It was great fun to talk with Mur again. I've really enjoyed watching her writing grow and mature, and I think what she said about never quitting is great advice that probably applies to almost any endeavor. We live in a world where people seem to expect instant success, but that's not how things really work. If you want links to any of the books we talked about today, be sure to visit my website at booksandideas.com. In fact, I would like to encourage you to visit the site if you haven't been there before. You will find free episode transcripts as well as links to things like Facebook and Twitter. And also there's a new SpeakPipe button so you can leave me audio feedback. Of course, you can always send me email feedback at docartemis@gmail.com. But SpeakPipe gives great audio quality, which is why I've added it to the website. One thing I should mention is the fact that it is a flash player, so if you are on your phone and use an iOS phone, it'll ask you to download the SpeakPipe app, and then you can give feedback for a lot of different shows. Please notice that what you're going to want to search for in SpeakPipe is going to be Doc Artemis, not Books and Ideas or Brain Science, but Doc Artemis. And please don't forget to subscribe in iTunes, even if you listen via the free Books and Ideas app or another podcasting app. My goal for 2017 is to produce at least 4 or 5 more episodes. So I need your feedback to help keep me going. Thanks again for listening. I look forward to talking with you again very soon. Books and Ideas is copyright 2017 to Virginia Campbell, MD. You can copy this podcast to share it with others, but for any other uses or derivatives, please contact me at docartemis@gmail.com. Theme music for Books and Ideas is The Open Door by Beatnik Turtle. Please visit their website at beatnikturtle.com.